stories of their families and stories of the people who are not with us today and the people who are with us and have survived the Holocaust. In the Haggadah that we just read, we read the phrase, B'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu. In every generation, they rise up against us and try to destroy us. V'hakadosh baruch hu matzilenu miyadam. And Hashem saves us from their hands. Mrs. Unger, who is going to speak today, is a testament to the fact that Hashem does help us in the end, and even though we go through suffering and they try to wipe us out, we survive and we're here. And Mrs. Unger had Mara Goldie, who's a teacher in this school and has taught many of you children. So it's a testament to the fact that even though there is suffering and there's anti-Semitism, in the end we survive, we move on, and we have this strong culture and the strength to be who we are as Jews. We have a yeshiva full of Jewish children learning Torah every day, dedicated to Hashem, and we always have to hold on to that and remember that. So today, we honor the stories and we think about, and really all the time, but today is a special day to think about the stories of the people who survived. And it is our job, because the Shoah happened in the 30s and 40s. And now the people who survived the Shoah are in their 80s and 90s. The people who survived as little babies are in their 80s and 90s. They're not going to be with us for so much longer. Your children are likely not going to have the opportunity to hear firsthand from a Holocaust survivor. So it's your job to hear their story, to remember their stories, to pass on their stories, because these are the people who witnessed the Shoah. They were there. They can tell their stories firsthand. When you grow up, you can tell the stories secondhand, and make sure to tell them to your children. So I want you to give your utmost attention to Mrs. Unger. I'm going to read to you what Mara Goldie said about her mom, because it's I can't say it any better. My mother, Zahava Unger, miraculously survived the horrors of the Holocaust. She lost her family, friends, her youth, but not her hope, spirit, and inner strength. My mother is a very special lady that never allowed any hatred to grow in her, but always understood the survivors that did. Her positive attitude is her trademark. So I'd like to introduce Mrs. Unger to please come address us. Unger.
Hello everyone. I'm the mother of Gordy Grunhardt, as you know, and also the grandmother of Judith Miller, who is also working here in this school. I'm going to tell you my story. Everybody's story is a little bit similar, but most of the time, everybody is their own. You know, all I can tell you is about my own. I was born in a small town in the Carpathian Mountain, but we started moving away when I was just a couple months old, so I don't remember that time. I remember mostly the time when we lived in the Czech Republic, which was not far from Prague, about 3 hours away from Prague. The life was very normal there. I never heard the word Jew or anything not positive about Jewish people. On the contrary, our neighbors were the most wonderful people. Our friends were wonderful. We had to go even on Shabbat to school, because that was the law, but we didn't have to write. That was exempt of that. But our friends, the non-Jews, carried our books, because we weren't allowed to carry on Shabbat. So from at the point of being religious Jews, it wasn't the best place to live, but otherwise it's the most wonderful place to be in. we were there, the city was on the border with the Sudetenland. Sudetenland was under the rule of the Germans. I don't know who knows. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not. I don't know who knows the story, but in 1938, Churchill, Prime Minister of England, came to Germany. He made a pact with the Germans. They give them a present, the Czech Republic, and there will be no war. All the newspapers came out the following morning. I got peace for the next couple of years will be peace. I succeeded it. But before he turned around, the Germans did not keep their bargain, and they marched into our city because, as I said, we were on the border right away. Before the war even broke out, they already marched in. And immediately things changed. The business my father worked for belonged to a Jew, an Israeli Jew, by the way, and it was taken away. And my father lost his business, and all the Jews lost their business, who was able to try to escape, but was very difficult because there was nowhere there to go. I always compare it like mice who look for a hole to escape, and every hole is blocked. There's no place where to go. So there was no place for us to go. One day we received a command from the German Gestapo to appear the whole family in Prague. I don't know if what Tisha B'Av means to everybody, a sad day, right? But nothing to compare to that day when we received that command. It was, my father was crying, and it was an unheard thing. My father should cry, he was a very distinguished man. He said, till him a whole night, because we didn't know what was gonna happen to us. So we had to, whatever the command was, we had to do. We went to Prague, and they gave us a choice. I don't know if you, and what kind of a choice that is. Within 2 weeks we have to leave the country, or they're gonna take us. So I don't think it's much of a choice. We had to leave. And it was very hard for us because it was just, we needed another 2 weeks to be able to go on a children transport to England. There was arrangement that they took some children to England, and that way they escaped. But we didn't have those 2 weeks. I'm sorry, 1 second. So my parents decided we were going back to the Carpathian Mountains, which was under the rule of the Hungarians. We children had to learn very fast Hungarian, which we didn't speak a word of it, because they were not allowed to know that we were not there all the time. Because if they would have known that, they would have shipped us to Poland. So we had to learn very fast Hungarian. Adjustment wasn't easy because our lifestyle was going downwards. In the Czech Republic, we had electricity, we had running water, we had facilities indoors, and then over there in the new place, none of that. We had to use an outhouse in the yard, no electricity, no. We had to chop wood for the winter to be able to heat a little bit the kitchen, cook, and heat the kitchen. So life wasn't easy. Mainly was very hard because they took away already, the Hungarians took away already permits from everybody to do any kind of business. And us, the villagers came back, of course we couldn't get any permit. My father couldn't get any permit. So we had a livelihood, was almost impossible to get. My father worked at anything possibly could. If it was in a factory at night, if it was bookkeeping for somebody during the day, whatever he was able to. But within a short time, the Hungarians started taking away my father. They took him away to labor camp, Hungarian labor camp. After a couple of months, he came home. While he was home for a couple of months, my youngest brother was born. Previously, we were 4 siblings, and the 5th one was born then. He was home for about a half a year, and then he was taken again. In 1942 was the last time we saw him alive. He was taken somewhere to Ukraine. He was murdered by the Ukrainians. So, of course, we even had less of a livelihood, less of an income to live by. My sister was going already there was, by the way, I forgot to mention, in the city was existing Hebrew gymnasium called high-level education in Hebrew. She was capable, so she went to that school. But because we had no livelihood, she decided to drop out of school, and so did my brother. The older 2 children dropped out from school and went to work. But because she was so well-liked and so knowledgeable, they allowed her to come only for exams without being in school. And she still did brilliantly. Later on, was a rumor someplace that if my brother, who was the oldest child, will get to Budapest, the capital of Hungary, from there on, somehow maybe he'll be able to, through Bnei Akiva, somewhere to escape. So my mother made him go. So we had only my sister for providing for us. So life wasn't easy, what can I tell you? But still we were together. Till 1944, then the Germans marched into that part of the land under Hungarian rule. Came out with all kinds of new rules. First of all, we had to wear the yellow star. It should be noticeable that we are Jewish. Then we weren't allowed to go out to the street in certain hours. And besides, the neighboring people, the Hungarians, were not very kind to us. Nothing to compare to the Czech people. They hated us. And people were scared to go out. When there was a mnemonic slichot, to go to slichot, people were scared because people were beaten up on the streets, all over. So again, the hardship became worse and worse. Then later on, just after Pesach in 1944, the morning after, we received, knocked at our doors and our windows within a couple of minutes to leave the house. We were going to a ghetto. The ghetto usually was in every city in a brick factory. That's where the ghettos were. But in our case, there was no more place in the brick factory, so we were in a lumber yard. So there was no roof above our head. And no food was provided. Except the little bit which we brought along, people prepared knapsacks to be able to carry some food with them or some belongings to them. In our case, we didn't have the money to get new knapsacks. So my mother sewed for us from sheets, double sheets, and made us knapsacks. We were in the ghetto for about a month. And then we were told that we have to be relocating. Of course, we had no place, no idea where are we relocating to. And they were taking us to the train station. We were walking to the train station. It wasn't very far. On the way, a little kid lost his mother. He started crying. And my mother wanted to comfort the child and took his hand. And the Hungarian gendarme who was in charge of us, not the Germans took us to the train station, not the Germans took care of us were in the ghetto, only the Hungarians. But that Hungarian gendarme didn't like the idea that my mother holding this child's hand. So what did he do? Took his rifle with the butt, started beating up my mother over the head. And with the bayonet, the other side of the rifle, ripped open our knapsack, which was easy to rip because it was made out of sheets. All we had in that one knapsack was one loaf of bread, which our non-Jew and ex-neighbor somehow shipped into the ghetto for us. And of course, the bread fell out, and we had nothing. We came to the train station, they loaded us up on a cattle cart, and no food at all, except we had a container of black coffee. So that's all sustained us for I don't remember exactly if we were 2 days or 3 days in the train. I really can't remember that. Anyhow, but on the way, my little brother, who was less than 2 years old, who was born much later, was begging for a piece of bread, and there's nothing to give him. People that, you can't imagine that. It's heartbreaking. Till somebody felt sorry for him and gave him a piece of bread. Anyhow, then we came and the train stopped finally, and we realized we are in Auschwitz. And we had to jump off the train fast because as soon as you come to Auschwitz, the first thing we heard, raus, schnell! And that is only 2 words everybody who was there will never forget. And I jumped down from the train, and my mother was behind me, and she tells me, from now on, you tell everybody you are 16 years old, and don't forget it. Remember, you are 16. In actuality, I was only 13. 2 minutes later, after I was walking like that with my sister, and we were approached by that Mengele, if you ever heard of him, the infamous doctor of Auschwitz, asked me how old I am, and I said, I'm 16. And that saved my life. It was number 1 of my miracles that happened to me. And the last verse I heard from my mother, because my mother and my 2 younger brothers were taken to the other side. My sister and I, we went with the rest of the women. First of all, the Germans, of course, they lied to us. They said, don't take your belongings. You'll find them next to your beds. Don't say long goodbyes. You're going to see your parents on Sunday. You be working and they're gonna see you on Sunday. Of course, it was all a lie. We were taken and our heads were shaven off, and we received one piece of clothing, one dress. I got a thin dress, and were taken to a barrack. They called it a barrack. This where they housed us. They were, I don't know if anybody in the museum saw how the beds looked in Auschwitz. You are too young to be in there. I don't know, to see it in a museum. And we were 6 people in a row sleeping next to each other. If we wanted to turn around in the middle of the night, every 6 had to move because we were so close to each other, except these, packed together. But we were still hopeful that we were gonna see our parents. We didn't want to believe that all the smoke we smelled a whole day, it's flesh, burning flesh. We didn't know that. And we were told by the couple. Couple was a Jewish person who lived in the same place with us, but had a separate little room of their own. And she was the one who told us, you never see your parents, don't you see the smoke? We didn't want to believe her. We were hopeful. Our days in Auschwitz consisted mostly of selections. But before that, once I had to get with a sledgehammer to break up stones into pebbles. I don't know how I lifted it, I don't even know. Today when I look at people who work with such a sledgehammers, I can't even imagine how I was able to lift it, but we did it. Later on, mostly it consisted of Zählappel. Zählappel means was counting early in the morning. We had to stand in line early in the morning. It was May, end of May, but we were very cold because even if it's May, early in the morning it's still cold. I don't know what time it was because none of us had a watch, but it must have been around 4 o'clock in the morning. It was still very dark. And they started counting us, and it's usually came German soldiers, women soldiers most of the time, with dogs, big scary dogs, and a whip in their hands. You never knew when it's falling upon you or not. And then we went back to the barrack, we got a cup of black coffee, and we went back to the barracks. Later on, we were called out for selections. And that was almost daily occurrence, the selections. You never knew if they take you to death or you take you somewhere to work. My sister and I, my sister kept on saying, doesn't matter where they take us, we're gonna live or not. As long as we are together, we wanted to just to be together. We were together for a while, till one day the selection was, and our block was on a lockup. We were not counted, we were not selected that time, but we were on a lockup. And it was like the middle of July, and it was very, very hot. And we were, there is some water in one of the courses. And I decided I'm going to try to get a little bit of water. Meanwhile, they opened our barrack, and my sister got scared that they're gonna take me. And she ran, and they caught her. By the time I came back, she was gone, and I never saw her again. So from then on, I was on my own. I was there about 6 months in Auschwitz. Third day I was taken, the last selection out of Auschwitz, I was taken to the train, and we were taken to a bomb factory. But before we were taken, our hair already started growing because it was a half a year later. It was around October when we were taken. And they cut a stripe in the middle of our head. And they put a cross on our clothing. We shouldn't be able to escape, I presume, because we were taken to a place where there were more civilian people around. We were taken to a bomb factory. Over there, the situation was much easier than in Auschwitz. Each of us got a bed of their own, a bunk bed, but a bed. No blankets, nothing. But they gave us paper sacks. I don't know if you have any idea, paper is very good insulation because we didn't feel so cold when we were in that paper bag sleeping in it. I had no time yet being in the bomb factory because first they gave us different kind of jobs to do. I had to carry frozen earth from one place to another. And it was quite heavy work. And while I was doing it, while I had to carry it on again I forgot the word. Okay, doesn't matter how you had to carry it. And some Germans were standing on my way, and I couldn't pass. And the German was talking to a Serb. There were some Serb people there. I have no idea what their connection was with the Germans, but they were very chummy to each other. But I understood there was a sign there to be in Serb that were tracks, train tracks. And in Serb was written that be careful because a train can pass. And I was able to read it because I still spoke Czech, and so the languages are similar, they're Slavic languages. So I started saying, the train is gonna come. If you're not moving, the train is gonna come. And the Serbs started laughing, and the man said to me, from then on, I'll protect you. I promise you. You're not gonna work inside the bomb factory, not even a day. And he kept his word. What does that mean to be in a bomb factory? It's filling up the bombs with poison. People became blue after a while when they were there. And then they had a room where they recuperated for a couple of weeks, and then they had to go back to that factory. But this sir kept on telling the Germans that he needed me for his landscaping job. He was responsible for that landscaping. And he and two of his friends became my protectors. That was my private love. My job of different kinds, but never inside that factory. And it happened also that sometimes I had to work with a German soldier, a woman soldier, one-on-one. And then she was very nice to me when she was one-on-one. Otherwise, she was very vicious. And she told me, I worked for Jewish people and they were not very nice to me. Now it's my payback time. But to me, she was good. Later on, when we were there in this I did different kind of jobs. I had to carry coal to the kitchen. I had to dig earth. I had all kinds of jobs, but not inside that factory ever. They used us, the kids, the younger kids, let's say they had to move, they filled up train loads of bombs, and they didn't bring a caboose to pull it, didn't pay. Us, about 20 of us, had to push it from one track to another. That was also one of our jobs. There one day, another German woman took me and locked me into a cellar. I had no idea why she's doing it. I was there a whole day in the cellar. At night she let me out, and all the girls who were about my age were taken away, and I survived. I really feel that it was hashgacha pratit, because otherwise I can't understand it. We were there in that bomb factory for about almost till the end of the war, about 2-3 weeks early before the war ended. We were taken to Theresienstadt. It was another big camp, a lot of people. First, originally it was a show camp for when they wanted to show off how nice they are to the Jews. So the Red Cross came to Theresienstadt. They kept the children alive. And so we were there for about 2-3 weeks, they said, so they accumulated there thousands and thousands and thousands of people from all over, from death marches, came by train, from all over. I don't know if it's true, but it makes sense. We were told that they meant to demolish the whole camp upon everybody being there. And the Russians came in a day earlier, and we were liberated. We were liberated, but what happened? They locked us up again as a quarantine because they were afraid that civilian population around would get some sicknesses from us, so we were locked up. We were not allowed to leave the camp. And no food was provided because the Germans didn't give us already anything, they were gone. The Russians didn't have anything to give us. But we didn't realize it at the time that maybe it was for our benefit. Because people who were liberated, but Americans, started right away eating, and they couldn't handle it. And they got sick. And we somehow survived it. We starved, but we survived it. And one day, out of the blue, some of my neighbors whom I was together with went out, and they spotted 2 of my aunts, 2 of my father's sisters. They were there, and they spotted him. So I had already a family, right? We were very happy to meet each other. And we were going, about 6 of us back, traveling back. We're gonna be looking for family. Even we knew that nobody's alive, but we still wanted to hope is such that a person is trying to hope to the last minute. Till you get some proof, you try to hope that somebody is gonna be alive. So we ran away from Theresienstadt, 6 of us. And we went from place to place, wherever somebody, one of our 6 was from, we went from place to place to look for family. Of course, we didn't find anybody. And my aunts decided they're gonna stay. This was in the Carpathian Mountains back again. And they decided they're gonna stay there and live there. They had enough of wandering, they had enough of traveling, they're gonna stay there. And I kept on saying, no, I'm not staying. I have to go to Israel. That was my dream forever. I'm gonna be alive, Hashem is gonna help me, I'll get there, I have to get to Israel. They wouldn't let me go because I was 14 years old by then. Where are you going? How are you going? How do you get there? Finally, we met somewhere, Jewish boys, and they said there is a home in Hungary. If she's gonna get there. There's a place to be there, Bnei Akiva home. And from there, maybe somehow she's gonna get to Israel. So they let me already go. Ask everybody and watch over her. Nobody looks at me. I'm sitting on the train going towards Hungary. We reach the border and they're asking for passports. And everybody who doesn't have a passport or any paper to prove where he's from, we ship back. And of course I have nothing. And I have no clue what I'm gonna say the last minute. I have no idea. What can I say? Last minute, second actually, passes by a Russian officer, sat next to me, grabbed my hand, and told him I'm his girlfriend, leave her alone. A second later, the man get up and disappeared. I never saw him, never said even a chance to say thank you, nothing. And I passed through. I arrived to Hungary, in Bnei Akiva. The first thing they asked me if I have anything non-kosher. And I said, yes, I still had something non-kosher which we got from some neighbor who gave us something to eat. And they told me to toss it out through the window, and that's what I did, and hopefully that was the last time I ate non-kosher. So that more or less was my life. But I was in Bnei Akiva, and then we had to, again there was a rumor that from Slovakia it's easier to get to Israel. So anybody who spoke any Slavic language was sent. Now, again, we had to cross a border, and they gave us names of towns we should say we are from. And I got the name, they come to the border, they asked me where I am from, and I said the name of the town. And the guy says to me, I want to have the exact address, where did you live, give me the address. I had no idea what am I going to say again. So I said the address where we used to live before deportation. And it worked. He let me through. I turned out to be I said I lived next to the train station. The train station was out of town, nobody knew anybody around there. So that's how it probably worked. I got to Slovakia, and within exactly to the year of my liberation, I was in Israel. I was in Israel, and in Israel I went to school first for 2 years, to a kibbutz. In kibbutz I went to the army, so 2 years in the army. Then I was discharged. That's more or less my story. Ever has anybody questions, please?
Okay, so we have questions. So the children submitted a bunch of questions. We'll ask you, did any of your family members survive the Holocaust?
Okay.
So you spoke about some
one
of your aunts.
brother, my oldest brother, who was in Budapest at the time, which I mentioned before, he was in Budapest as on non-Jew papers, lived like a non-Jew. He was blonde, he was able to get away with it. And there was, I don't know if you ever heard of a Kastner transport. No. There was a Jew by the name of Kastner. Somehow he got connection with Eichmann. And for money, promised to let out some people to go to Switzerland. That was the promise. And people needed a lot of money for that, I guess, because they had to pay off Eichmann for that. They wanted to have trucks or something of the kind. Anyhow, so my brother went just to say goodbye to somebody. And some of us afraid to the last minute because they didn't trust Eichmann exactly. So he jumped up instead of that person. And therefore his life is safe. And he got to Israel before I got there. And we ended up being in the same school. Later on, he was in Gush Etzion. He was a prisoner of war by the Jordans for 11 months till he came out.
Thank you. How were you able to keep your faith in Hashem? Did your faith change in Hashem after the war?
That's what people ask me, and I think that was the easiest thing to answer. Because people who had no trust in anybody, nothing to believe on, to attach yourself to the belief that you're going to be alive, attach yourself somehow you're going to be surviving. Those people lost everything because they were so depressed that you find them, I don't know if I didn't mention that, but in Auschwitz, every camp, every section was wired, and every wire was electrified. People who came closer, the wires pulled them close, and they, every morning when we woke up, we saw people on the fences, dead. So being able to believe, that was the easiest.
Was there ever a time that you thought that the Nazis would win? Did you think any Jews would survive?
But
Was there,
excuse me, I couldn't hear that.
was there ever a time that you thought that the Nazis would win?
Yes, we were very hopeful. We were hopeful. You see, I was young. And when you're young, you somehow don't think too deeply. And we were very hopeful that we're going to be able to get out of this.
Let's see if you can answer this one. I mean, no pressure, but they're getting deeper and deeper. Do you think what is going on today is the same or different from the 1930s?
Today is the scariest thing in my life, because I never thought that in my lifetime it's going to happen again. We have the army, we have everything, we have Israel. Who would have thought that something like that could happen? Those hostages get back out, and then everything will be much better because it's.
What helped you cope during and after the war? What helped you cope? What kept you alive? What helped you?
Kept me alive. I'm strong, because otherwise people who are not lose their faith and there's nothing. Right away we went, we worked, we did. And then Israel was such, when I arrived in 1946, during the British time, was such that our teachers, in school when we were, discouraged us from talking about our experiences. Not to talk, not to think, nothing to do. Like, keep on living. My teacher, my madrid, he became later on a psychologist. He was top psychologist in Yerushalayim. And he met me once and he said, I owe you al hate, that I discouraged you from talking. And I'm not sure that he's right. I think somehow we all picked it up. I mean, in my class, we were about 45 survivors all, and we were together. And we all kept on, we got married, we all had families, we continue living. So maybe they were right of not to dwell on it all the time. And my children attest to it also, that they had a normal upbringing. We never spoke about it. Not my husband, not me.
And two more, I guess. Were you able to celebrate holidays?
None whatsoever. Once I wanted to in Auschwitz, I somehow knew, I don't know how I knew, but I knew about Tisha B'Av. I wanted to fast. Okay. And I collapsed. I fell to the ground, and it would have cost me my life. Just they succeeded, pick me up first from the two sides because we're always standing like 5 in a row. They succeeded to pick me up before the Germans saw us.
Okay, and finally, can you tell us?
Pesach. We wanted Pesach with someone new, so we decided not to eat the bread. We survived 2 days because we were starving. I don't know if I can ever explain that to somebody, to make somebody understand being so hungry, and being so cold all the time. So, how do you do that? We tried, but it didn't last too long.
Okay, and then finally, can you tell us a little bit about your family today and?
My family today, thank God, I have a nice big family, and that's my pride and joy. That's really
Bar mitzvah tonight.
Miller is here, number one of my
Great grandson's bar mitzvah.
I have 2 grandchildren.
And how many great?
How many great grandchildren do you have today? So Mrs. Unger has 120 descendants, great grandchildren, beautiful. Okay, and our girls would like to present you with the Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you. Now, Omer.